All right, second hour of the show. We're going to check out on the Birds, the NFL. John McMullen from Birds 365 on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel. Set to join me right now here on this Tuesday as the Eagles got some news over at training camp today, which could impact the start of the season. We'll dive into that and more Eagles NFC East stuff as well. John McMullen, who's back here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN as we take you up to the NovaCare Center today, where the Eagles had some news on center Jason Kelce. And I was talking about, John, over these years, the Eagles have had a ton of injuries on the offensive line. Now, he has had some injuries. None have caused him to miss games. He's been like the one guy. You wonder now if he's going to be the guy that all these injuries finally catch up to, and he might now be in danger of missing the start of the season. So what do we know about where Kelce is right now?
Yeah, I mean, the Eagles kind of downplayed it at first during practice because everybody, kind of panics, the fan base, when Jason Kelce's not out there. So they kind of said, he's got an elbow injury, but it's not that serious. And then all of a sudden after practice, it comes down that he's going to have a routine clean-out surgery, which I always laugh at that term routine because routine surgery is routine for anybody who's not having the surgery. So it's never routine for the people having the surgery. So basically he had discomfort in the elbow. It's always really, really braced up and padded up. It's his left elbow, and they're going to clean it out. And, I think the timing was key. Jason, as you mentioned, yeah, I think the number is 122, Mike, straight consecutive regular season games. Hasn't missed a game since 2014. He plans to play in week 1, but obviously you're not going to see him anymore in the preseason. Now, the only,
which we weren't expecting to we weren't expecting to see him in preseason anyway, right?
No, and that, maybe a series here or there, but I doubt it. I doubt it. Started looking around, arthroscopic elbow surgery. Falcons receiver had it in 2015. I can't think of the name. I'll try to look it up in just a second. And he had it late August, and was back for the first game, which was on September 14th. So, I mean, anybody who knows Jason, I'd be stunned if he's not out there week 1. And, maybe it's a silver lining. You get Cam Jurgens, a rookie center, second-round pick, more reps in the preseason. And maybe that's a positive thing. But I go back to last year when everybody said Landon Dickerson was a luxury pick, and all of a sudden he's a starting guard. And, everybody was saying, how could you take Cam Jurgens? How could you take Cam Jurgens? Well, Jason is 34 years old, so here's why you take Cam Jurgens.
Yeah, I was one of the people who kind of questioned the pick, but my reasoning wasn't the position. It was generally Kelce himself was a 5th or 6th round pick. I just thought in the second round that to take basically your heir apparent at that position was a little high.
Yeah, I get it, but I mean there aren't too many 6th-round picks turning into Jason Kelce. So yeah, in the past there have been centers that you can certainly get competent play that are mid-round picks, but the Eagles value that position. A lot of the reason they value it is because what Jason Kelce has turned into. But, to assume you can replicate Jason Kelce, that's like saying, Tom Brady was a 6th-round pick. You don't replicate it too often.
That's fair.
You're probably not going to get another Jason Kelce in the 6th round. You might get one in the 2nd round or the 1st round.
Well, while we're on the topic of this offensive line, I mean, every publication that does rankings has this offensive line, 1, 2, 3, somewhere in the top 5. How deep is this offensive line? Like if there was, a couple of years ago, they got ravaged by injuries. I mean, if that would be the case, they lost 2-3 guys again this year. How deep is this line?
It's pretty deep when you compare it to the rest of the league. So that's the context, and it's pretty deep. But you kind of saw it early here in camp. Jordan Mailata gets a concussion, Andre Dillard gets a concussion. Then all of a sudden you're down to LaRaven Clark as your third team tackle. And by the way, he got a hamstring and now he's out. And you're down to Coyote Awasika as your fourth string tackle, trying to run practices. And that doesn't even count Brett Toth, who's on the PUP list, who can also play left tackle, can also play center, by the way. And he tore his ACL in week 18 last season. So it's kind of like you might say LaRaven Clark, if you want to go down the list to use LaRaven Clark, he might be the best third left tackle in football. But what does that really mean? If you got to play him, you're up you-know-what creek. So there is good depth, but there's a big difference between, Lane Johnson and Jack Driscoll. There's a big difference between Jason Kelce and Cam Jurgens. There's a big difference between even Jordan Mailata and Andre Dillard. So they have really good depth compared to everybody else, but you can't replace players like Lane Johnson and Jason Kelce and Jordan Mailata and expect similar play. So I think it's kind of a layered question. The depth is really good.
Yeah.
But, Jack Driscoll's an average player. That most teams don't have average players as backup offensive linemen.
You mentioned Dillard. We just saw the injury in New York. I'm not going to say, hey, the Jets are calling the Eagles to try to get Dillard, but I guess the question would be if there was a starting level left tackle around the league that went down, are the Eagles open to listening, or do they not want to move Dillard?
That's one. I think right now they don't want to move him. But maybe that changes at the deadline, and you have to weigh these things. They know they're going to lose him after this season, so they didn't pick up the fifth-year option. He's going to be a free agent. He's going to get a decent contract. He's not going to be here because he's not going to be the starting left tackle here, and he could be a starting left tackle somewhere else in the NFL. So it is a tough decision. Right now, I think the Eagles think they're a contender, and they'd rather have the depth in case something happens to Jordan Mailata. I think a lot of people forget, Jordan has had some back problems. He's a 6'8", 380-pound guy that you got to be cautious. Same thing with Lane Johnson. Look, Nick Sirianni called, Lane Johnson the best right tackle in the world the other day. He almost quit last year, and a big part of his battle with anxiety and depression was that his ankle was not doing well coming off that reconstructive surgery. He couldn't move very well, and he thought he couldn't play anymore. So you have to be cautious from that standpoint. We're just talking about Jason Kelce. He's played through so many injuries. What does that do to your body? He as I said, over at SI.com, we have a picture of Jason, just how he's, braced up that elbow every day just to get through practice. And all of a sudden you show up one hot day and boom, he's having surgery. So I think that they find the value in somebody like Andre Dillard right now more than what a trade would get them back. Now, if somebody got desperate and called up with a second-round pick, I think that might change the conversation.
If you just mentioned Johnson, I looked up the other day. He's played like 32 out of the last 49, so he's missed a considerable amount of games with injury, and you just touched on his injury. If he got hurt again, would they go to Mailata to right tackle and Dillard to left, or did Mailata stay at left and Driscoll play right tackle? How would they do that this particular time around?
I think, we don't know until it happens, but I think they want to keep Jordan at left tackle this time. And many of us thought there was going to be a competition at right guard between Isaac Seumalo and Jack Driscoll hasn't turned out. Jack hasn't taken one rep that I've seen, and I've been at every open practice at right guard. He's taken all his reps at right tackle. That tells me they want him ready at right tackle just in case if something happens to Lane Johnson. So my guess, if that were to happen this year, they would at least at first try Jack Driscoll at right tackle, keep Jordan at left tackle. And if that didn't work, then they might, because Stout's very big about getting the best players on the field, then they might consider juggling. But he generally, and I'm talking about Jeff Stoutland, he generally doesn't like to move multiple parts if he doesn't have to.
I know yesterday we had talked about Seumalo. Essentially, there is no competition, but is Juergens getting any work at right guard? I mean, they had mentioned that they can kind of cross-train him, and that was part of the allure of, well, he's more than just a center. He can play some guard.
He's taken a few snaps at guard. I'm more left guard than right guard.
Okay.
Right guard's been mainly Sua Opeta as the backup to Isaac Seumalo. But, they, again, if you start talking, if Isaac gets hurt again, who's going to play right guard? Probably be Driscoll.
I was going to say.
At that point, they would probably.
It kind of slipped my mind because you said Driscoll hasn't played there at all, but I guess that doesn't really mean anything. They like Jack Anderson, right?
They know he can play there.
Yeah.
And he played very well there last year, so they would probably go in that direction. Sua Opeta is a player they like that people don't talk about. He can play both guard spots, and they think he's better at left guard than right guard. So there's a lot of moving parts. I don't think Cam Juergens is going to play guard. If somebody was going to get hurt, I think they think he's a natural center, and that's where he's going to play. It's just a matter of, and a lot. And Lane Johnson, by the way, said it a couple weeks ago. Probably didn't, probably let the cat out of the bag. He's told people this is going to be his last year. So, and Jason Kelce, I'm talking about. So, that's why they brought Cam Juergens in, and he's the heir apparent at center.
Right, yeah, we I guess we figure that, and I guess instead of, because like Dickerson last year, there was some thought that he could be a center, but then, they had injuries, and then he played so well at left guard, and then him and Mailata next to each other, it was almost like, maybe we'll just keep him at guard. Was there ever any intention, do you think, that Dickerson was going to be the heir apparent at center, and that he just played so well at guard that they liked him and Mailata together and decided to move in another direction?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. And Jason Kelce always jokes. He's had about 8 heir apparents at this point in his career. Yeah, they were taking Landon to be the center in case Jason retired or moving on, and that's why. If you go back, he suffered the ACL late in his final college season, so there were some injury concerns, and the Eagles were like, well, we'll wait for him. He's not we don't expect him to play early on. And all of a sudden you have all the issues, and Brooks is hurt again, and Seumalo gets hurt early in the season, and you got to play him. And he played really well. And I think a lot of people forget Brandon got hurt before Isaac. So Landon was first at right guard, and then Isaac got hurt and they moved him to left guard. And yeah, they got to look at, 380 pounds and 330 pounds next to each other. And Howie Roseman said that this offseason. He said, we're not messing with that. That was dominant.
Good.
And they're going to keep those guys together for as long as possible.
John McMullen, Birds 365, 8 to 10 a.m. on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel every morning, talking Eagles. And you can check out his writing at Sports Illustrated. SI.com. You mentioned Reddick's name. His name, I forget even in the context, but it just popped into my head. And we asked about A.J. Brown. That was the big acquisition on the offensive side of the ball. What kind of anticipation does this defense, does Reddick fit into this defense? Is he going to be a guy at the end of the year you're like, man, this guy was a perfect fit? Or are you kind of questioning the fit, seeing him through camp so far?
No, I think he's a good fit. I think the bigger fit, though, I think the domino piece is Jordan Davis. I think he's the one that allows everything to fall into place. And we'll see how he shakes out because they didn't have a real natural nose tackle. Basically, they want to play Vic Fangio's defense. So if anybody, and
is there any question that
league,
Vic Fangio will be the next defensive coordinator? That guy's at practice every day.
Yeah. Well, Vic will have his choice of jobs. He can go wherever he wants, basically.
I mean, in the event that John Gannon gets hired, I guess we should say.
Yeah, I mean, I think Vic wants to be a head coach again. And we'll see how things shake out. So he's going to take this year off, and if he wants to come back and he wants to be a defensive coordinator, he'll have literally 10 jobs out. Everybody would want to hire him. Over 50% of the league is planning to run his defense, and the Eagles are one of them. And it's nice that they have him available to pick his brain. And but a key part of it is the odd man fronts, and people get hung up on the 4-3 versus 3-4. Really, he plays a 5-2 overhang is what they call it, where you have, so it'll look like a 5-man front. You have the 4-eye technique that you heard about last year that Fletcher Cox didn't like. So the Eagles were playing it last year. They just didn't have a nose tackle.
Right. Well, and that was the whole Fletcher Cox saying, they pay me to rush the passer. And Gannon was saying, I don't want you to rush the passer. I want you to do this. And that's what Davis will now do.
Yeah, exactly. And so, Davis should not only, you saw him in college with Nakobe Dean, like everybody watch Nakobe Dean highlights, but watch when he's making plays, watch the big guy who's right in front of him in almost all the highlights, because he's taking up 2 or 3 blockers, allowing him to make plays. That's what he's going to do for the Eagles in theory. And that should open one-on-ones for Josh Sweat and Hassan Reddick and the linebackers, just like he did for Dean as far as them. So he's the key piece to it all. But Reddick is the best pass rusher, best edge rusher they've had in a very, very long time. They haven't had a double-digit edge rusher since Connor Barwin, I think in 2014. So it's been a long time. If he doesn't get to 10, I would say it's because he's not healthy. He can rush the passer. Mm-hmm. The question is, how does he hold up at the run game? Because he's undersized. He's sort of a tweener. So that might be a little bit of a concern. But no, nobody cares about the run game until December, Mike. So we don't have to worry about that for a while.
All right, John. Pro Football Focus picked their most intriguing Eagles player. Who would be yours?
Most intriguing Eagles player.
You want me to tell you who their pick was, or do you want to guess first?
I'll guess. I think the most intriguing is Jordan Davis, but since I just mentioned him, I'm going to go. For me, it's Marcus Epps, because I think he's got a chance to be a good player, and I don't think people realize it.
So
that would be for me.
I too said my picks were like Marcus Epps, T.J. Edwards, Kaiser White, like those type of guys where we just don't like. Edwards is. He's been here, but most people just anticipate that he's going to be replaced, and he's like not so fast. White, who hasn't been here, is a linebacker with athletic ability that no Eagles linebacker has had in quite some time. Epps, we keep hearing good things about, but don't really know. But Pro Football Focus went with Quez Watkins as the most intriguing player. There you go, right?
Well, Not that Quez is a bad player. I don't mean it like that.
Quez had almost 700 yards receiving last year.
Yeah, everybody, that's like a 20-point score on a bad NBA team. Somebody's got to be the second receiver. I wouldn't be comfortable with Quez Watkins being the second receiver. So that was why the A.J. Brown trade was such a big domino. To me, A.J. Brown is the Jordan Davis of the offense because everything fits into place because you got A.J. Brown. Now, all of a sudden, Devontae Smith's probably not ready to be a 1, but he's a great 2. Quez Watkins is not a 2, but he's a solid 3. The problem with watching Eagles practice, the only guys who get targeted are A.J. Brown and Dallas Goedert. So I asked Nick about that at the Lincoln Financial field practice. I mean, the game has changed. I think there's this old, sentiment that, oh, you got to have these full field progressions, and you don't. Other than a few quarterbacks, Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers and Matt Ryan's of the world, when they retire, you see how the college game is played. It's half field progressions. It's basically two A, B, 2 receivers, and for the Eagles, it's going to be A.J. Brown and Dallas Goedert, and that's what it's been in camp. They've gotten so much traffic. And then you start to think, I'm worried about Devontae Smith getting the ball more than, Quez Watkins isn't gonna see a ton of traffic from the way it looks right now. And that's up to the coaching staff. So I can already envision people criticizing Jalen Hurts like they criticized Carson Wentz when he threw the football too much to Zach Ertz. I could already see that happening this year with AJ and Dallas. But, I mean, it's Shane Steichen and Nick Sirianni that have to be disciplined and have to understand, all right, yeah, AJ's our best receiver. Dallas Goedert is one of the best tight ends in football. Those are our top 2 options. But you got to be disciplined to get other people involved because this isn't Joe Montana. You're not going from progression A on the right side of the field all the way to D on the left side of the field. That's not how the modern NFL works. Yeah. It just isn't.
Hey, last one for Johnny Mac. John McMullen, all football season long, is back here on the Sports Bash. Who's more important to the offense, A.J. Brown or Goddard?
That's a good question, Mike. I think Goddard has slightly more targets than A.J. By the end of last season, I think Jalen became very comfortable with Dallas Goedert, and he became his top target over Devontae Smith. I think they're both really important. I'm going to go AJ because I think he's more important to the offense as a whole because just of what I said, he allows the other receivers to fit into better spots. I remember when Jordy Nelson was an all-pro with the Packers, and he tore his ACL. And all the Packers they always have that explosive passing offense. But when he got hurt, Randall Cobb at the time was a good number, was a great slot receiver, and all of a sudden he had to become the number 1 guy. It just wasn't him. He couldn't do it. He couldn't see that. James Jones was a good complementary receiver, but then you kick him up a notch, wasn't as good. Everything falls into place when A.J. Brown's there.
Right.
So he's that domino like Jordy Nelson was back in the day for the Packers.
All right. Tuesday, report on the Birds as they get ready for Friday night against the Jets, and we'll have more on that tomorrow. Johnny Mac, tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel. You can check out Birds 365, weekdays 8 to 10 with Jody Mac and Johnny Mac. Is Jody in this week? Is he off?
No, he was off today. He was at Eagles practice,
Gotcha.
But he'll be back tomorrow, and I'll be doing the show for the first half hour. Then I got to get down to practice. Jeff Kerr, your buddy Jeff Kerr, is filling in for me tomorrow.
Very good. All right, John. We'll talk to you tomorrow, pal.
All right, thanks, man.
There's Johnny Mac here on the Sports Bash, 97.3 ESPN. Johnny Mac is back. He's got a lot of Eagles, and we bring him back for the football season here at 3 o'clock each day for you.